Welcome to episode 166 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's April 15, 1989. It is 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in Sheffield. An FA Cup semi-final. Liverpool against Nottingham Forest. Kenny Dalglish against Brian Clough, one of the great ties of the age. And then, 6 minutes after kickoff, football stops. Referee Ray Lewis halts the match at 3:06 p.m. Supporters are climbing fences, spilling onto the pitch, waving desperately for help. What should have been one of the showpiece afternoons of the English season has become a catastrophe. 97 women, men and children would ultimately lose their lives as a result of the crush at the Leppings Lane end, and nothing in English football would ever look quite the same again. How did we get here? To understand why this semi-final mattered so much, you have to understand where Liverpool and Nottingham Forest stood in 1989. Liverpool were the giant of late 20th century English football. By the spring of 1989, they had won 5 of the previous 7 league titles and finished second in the other 2. This was still the club built by Shankly, turned into a dynasty by Paisley, and carried forward by Dalglish. They were the reigning champions. They were chasing another title. They were still, in every meaningful sense, the team of the era. Forest, though, were no ordinary opponent. Brian Clough had taken them from promoted surprise to champions of England and then champions of Europe, twice. By 1989, that first great burst had passed, but Forest were in the middle of a magnificent season. 6 days before Hillsborough, they had beaten Luton 3-1 at Wembley to win the League Cup, with Nigel Clough scoring twice. Later that same month, they would win the full Members' Cup as well. They would finish third in the league. This was the second year running the Liverpool and Forest met in the FA Cup semi-final. And that matters because the FA Cup still carried a special voltage then, especially the semi-finals. And in the years of the Heysel ban, when English clubs were shut out of Europe, domestic cup football carried even more emotional weight. The full Members' Cup existed because Europe had been taken away. The FA Cup, by contrast, still felt glamorous and central. But there was a darker context too. English football had fenced itself in. High perimeter fences, narrow access points, pens. In response to hooliganism, grounds were managed around containment. At Hillsborough, there had already been serious warnings. A crush there in 1981. Problems at major semi-finals in 1987. And more problems in 88 when these same clubs met there. Yet this ground was chosen again. And Liverpool, with a larger support, were again given the Leppings Lane end with its known bottlenecks. So Hillsborough did not come from nowhere. It came out of a football culture that had normalized old grounds, hard barriers, weak safety thinking, and a policing mindset that too often treated supporters as a threat to be controlled rather than people to be protected. And then came the day itself. Kickoff was set for 3 p.m. Outside the Leppings Lane end, congestion built badly. Too many supporters were being fed toward too few turnstiles. With the crush outside worsening, an exit gate, Gate C, was opened to relieve pressure. The critical failure came next. The tunnel leading directly into the already overcrowded central pens was not closed. And so supporters kept being funneled into the worst possible place. Inside pens 3 and 4, density became lethal. People at the back could not see the danger at the front, and people at the front had nowhere to go. The fences that were supported to keep order became traps. Some supporters climbed the perimeter fencing, others were hoisted up by strangers, and many couldn't move at all. On the pitch, the players didn't immediately grasp the full horror. Steve Staunton was nearest. Bruce Grobbelaar heard pleas behind his goal, and Peter Beardsley hit the bar, and then the game was stopped. The next images would circle the world. Supporters laid out on the turf, advertising hoardings used as makeshift stretchers, police and fans and staff trying to improvise rescue in a scene for which the system had proved catastrophically unprepared. And here we have to be precise. This was not hooliganism. This was not Liverpool supporters causing their own deaths. This was failed crowd management, failed stadium safety, and failed policing. Taylor identified the main reason for the disaster as the failure of police control. The Hillsborough independent panel made clear that the fans were not the cause, and later inquests concluded that the victims were unlawfully killed. That clarity took years, because Hillsborough was not only a disaster, it became a national scandal of truth, blame, and justice. In the immediate aftermath, false stories were pushed into public life. Drunkenness, disorder, ticketless hordes, and hooliganism. The families of the dead and the survivors then had to fight not only grief, but distortion. Justice for the 96 became one of the defining campaigns in modern British public life. And after Andrew Devine died in 2021 from the irreversible injuries he suffered that day, the number became 97. And neither did the trauma disappear. Dalglish and his wife Marina attended funeral after funeral. Ian Rush later said Dalglish took the grief of the city on his shoulders. John Barnes spoke of tears, guilt and confusion on the journey home. Steve Staunton said decades later that it was still hard to talk about what he saw. Forest players carried it too. Stuart Pearce said the reality truly hit when Forest went to Anfield the next day and saw all the flowers. Brian Laws later said every player involved thought about it and never forgot it. The season did continue though, even that was uncertain at first. The semi-final was replayed at Old Trafford on May 7. Liverpool won 3-1. Then came the final against Everton, an all-Merseyside final played under the weight of shared grief. Liverpool won that too, 3-2 after extra time. And yet the league title slipped away in the most famous last-minute finish English football had ever seen. On May 26, Arsenal beat Liverpool 2-0 at Anfield and took the championship with Michael Thomas's goal in the final seconds. So the season ended with Liverpool carrying both triumph and loss, public duty and private pain. So what then is Hillsborough's place in football history? It changed the architecture of the game. The Taylor Report accelerated the removal of perimeter fencing and drove the conversion to all seater stadiums at the top end of English football. Crowd safety, access, emergency response, and stadium certification all had to be rethought. When England hosted Euro 96 and Hillsborough itself staged matches, that was part of the same post-Taylor world. It also changed Liverpool forever. Hillsborough is literally woven into the club's identity. The eternal flames on the crest, the memorial culture each April, the 97 emblem on the back of the shirts. For Liverpool, Hillsborough is not past, it is permanent. And finally, it stands near the end of one era of English football and the beginning of another. In 1989, the FA Cup semi-final still felt like one of the grand occasions of the national game. Soon, English clubs would return to Europe. Then would come the Premier League and the Champions League age, and a shift in football's center of gravity. The FA Cup didn't die, but it lost some of that old singular shine. Hillsborough did not cause that change on its own, but it sits at the hinge point between the old game and the new one. Before we go, 3 things to take away from April 15, 1989. First, Hillsborough was not a story of hooliganism. It was a story of catastrophic failures in crowd control, stadium safety, and emergency response. Second, the disaster didn't end on the day. Its aftermath became a decades-long struggle over truth, accountability, and justice. And third, Hillsborough transformed English football physically, politically, and emotionally, and nowhere more deeply than at Liverpool itself. On this day in 1989, the FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest was abandoned after 6 minutes at Hillsborough, where a fatal crush caused by catastrophic failures in crowd management took 97 lives and changed English football forever. That is all for episode 166 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history. Tomorrow, we go to Brazil in 1984, when Socrates stepped up to a microphone at a political rally and promised to stay and fight for democracy. See you then.